The alien woman sat alone at the edge of the settlement, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes lowered toward the dirt path that stretched into the distance. The settlement was alive with voices, traders shouting prices, children running between, stalls, families sharing meals, yet she felt none of it belonged to her. She lived among them, but she was never part of them. To her people, she carried a flaw that was unforgivable. She could not bear children. In her world, family meant survival, family meant honor, family meant worth. Every child was seen as a gift, a continuation of the bloodline, a proof of belonging. But she had no gift to give. Whispers followed her wherever she walked. Some pitied her, some mocked her, and some avoided her altogether. To them, she was incomplete. She was the woman no one wanted, the one cursed by fate. At night, she lay awake on her small bed, listening to the laughter of neighbors drift through her window. Families sat together by firelight, children playing in their parents' arms, while she sat in silence, her heart aching. The truth burned inside her, and though she tried to bury it, the pain always rose again. She wanted to scream. She wanted to ask why fate had chosen her to carry such emptiness, yet no answer ever came. Once, long ago, she had hoped someone might see beyond her curse. She had dreamed of a companion, someone who would take her hand and say she was enough. But time had taught her otherwise. Suitors came and left when they learned the truth. Friends turned distant when the whispers grew louder. Even her own family had stopped speaking of her future, as if she had none. On one quiet evening, when the market lights flickered and the sky turned crimson, she whispered her pain into the wind. She sat on the steps of her small home, her face hidden in her palms. "I cannot have children," she confessed softly, her voice breaking. "And because of this, no one will ever want me." The words escaped before she could stop them. She had never spoken them aloud, never dared to let them leave her lips, but once spoken, they cut through the silence like a knife. For a moment she felt lighter, as if the air itself carried part of her burden. Yet at the same time, the confession weighed heavier, as though the world had heard her weakness and judged her for it. Her memories played before her eyes like shadows. She saw the faces of those who had turned away, the looks of men who had once smiled but then walked out of her life, the pitying stares of women who spoke in hushed voices when she passed. Each memory was a wound, and together they formed scars that no healing touch could erase. Still, she kept moving each day. She worked in the market, she traded goods, she tried to live quietly. She told herself she needed nothing more, that if fate had denied her children and family, she would learn to walk alone. But inside, she knew the truth. She was lonely, and the loneliness was unbearable. Her people valued strength, but they also valued continuation. A warrior was honored, but a mother was worshipped. Without children, she was seen as half a person, as though something essential was missing. She tried to carry herself with dignity, to walk as if their opinions did not touch her, but in her chest the ache never faded. One night, as the stars stretched across the black sky, she wandered far from the settlement. She walked until the sounds of voices faded, until she was alone in the open fields where only the wind moved. There she fell to her knees and pressed her hands to the earth. "Why am I cursed?" she whispered, her words trembling. "Why must I carry this emptiness when I only wanted love?" Tears filled her eyes, but she did not wipe them away. She let them fall, let them mark her face, let them be the only proof that her heart was still alive. She thought of what others had said, that even a human would not want her, for even outsiders sought family above all. The thought stung, as if even the universe had no place for her. And yet, in the back of her mind, a tiny spark flickered. It was not hope, not yet, but something restless, something unspoken. She had seen humans before, wandering traders, tired soldiers, lonely wanderers. They too seemed to carry burdens, scars of war, losses of family, pain they never confessed. Perhaps there were hearts among them that might understand hers, but the thought vanished as quickly as it came, drowned by her fear. She could not imagine anyone, human or alien, choosing to stand beside her. She was marked. She was unwanted. She was destined to walk alone. Still, the night whispered around her, carrying voices she could not understand, carrying promises she could not believe. She lifted her eyes toward the stars, her face pale in the silver light. "If there is someone who will not turn away," she said quietly, "let them find me before I am lost completely." She did not know then that her words were not in vain. She did not know that fate had already set a path before her. A traveler was drawing near, a man whose heart carried wounds as deep as hers, a man who would see her not as broken, but as whole. And when he came, everything would change. The settlement woke with noise and color the next morning. The market filled with the smell of roasted roots and dried fish, the clang of tools, the chatter of bargaining voices. Among the crowd, no one noticed at first the tall figure walking through the gates. He was different from the rest, his clothes patched but sturdy, his boots marked with long miles of travel, his face shadowed by the dust of the road. He was a human. The alien woman sat in her usual place by the edge of the market, sorting herbs into small baskets. She did not expect her life to change, not today, not ever. Yet her eyes lifted for just a moment, and in that moment, she saw him. He walked slowly, scanning the stalls, his gaze sharp yet tired, as if he had seen too much of the galaxy. Humans were rare in her settlement. Most only passed through for trade or rest. They never stayed long. She told herself not to stare, but her hands froze over the herbs. Something about him caught her attention. His quiet strength, his worn but steady walk, the way he seemed to notice everything yet keep his thoughts hidden. He stopped at a stall near hers, speaking to a trader about water supplies. His voice was rough, not cruel but hardened by distance. The trader haggled, trying to raise the price. The human only gave him a steady look, and the trader lowered his tone. People noticed then. Humans often had that effect. They carried a weight that unsettled others, a history of battles and survival that was not easily ignored. The woman tried to return to her work, but her heart beat faster. She feared he might see her, and if he did, she feared he would see what others always saw, her flaw, her emptiness. Yet when his eyes did meet hers, there was no mockery. His gaze lingered for only a breath. Then he offered the smallest nod, a silent greeting before turning back to his purchase. It was nothing, only a nod, but to her it felt like the first time in years that someone looked at her without judgment. She lowered her head quickly, her hands trembling, unsure why her chest felt suddenly warm. The whispers began soon after. 2 women at the well noticed the human pause by her stall. They laughed quietly, their voices sharp. "He does not know who she is," one said. "He will learn soon enough." Others smirked, nudging each other, waiting for the moment the human would hear the truth and turn away like all the rest. But the human did not leave. He walked closer, scanning her baskets of herbs. "These are fresh," he said in a calm tone. "Do you sell them for travelers?" She hesitated, unsure if her voice would break. "Yes," she answered softly. "They help with wounds and fever." He picked up a bundle, inspecting it with care, then nodded. "I will take this one." He handed her a small coin of silver, fair value, maybe more. Her fingers brushed his hand as she took the payment. A strange rush passed through her, not just fear, but something unfamiliar, something that felt like being seen, being spoken to as if she mattered. She almost forgot to give him the herbs. "Thank you," he said simply, then walked on. Her heart raced long after he disappeared into the crowd. It was such a small exchange, no more than a traveler buying herbs, yet to her it felt like a crack in the wall she had built around her life. She wondered if he had heard the whispers yet, if he knew what others said of her. She wondered if when he did hear he would turn his eyes away like everyone else. By evening the whispers had grown louder. Children repeated what they heard from their parents. "The cursed woman," they said, pointing toward her. She tried to ignore them, but her chest ached. She sat outside her small home, staring at the horizon where the sun dipped low. Then footsteps approached. She turned and saw him again. The human carried a small pack over his shoulder, his eyes tired but steady. He paused near her door, as if deciding whether to speak. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, he spoke. "You live here alone?" She nodded slowly. "Yes." He studied her face, not with cruelty, but with quiet curiosity. "The market is loud with voices, yet you sit apart. Why?" Her throat tightened. No one had ever asked her this, not with genuine interest. For a moment she wanted to tell him everything, to spill her secret, to confess her pain. But fear held her tongue. "I prefer the quiet," she said instead, her voice calm though her heart pounded. He did not question further. He only nodded again, as if he understood something she had not spoken. Then he adjusted his pack and walked on, leaving her with a strange feeling, half relief, half longing. As night fell, she lay awake, the memory of his voice echoing in her mind. She told herself it meant nothing. He was only a traveler, only passing through. By tomorrow he might be gone. Yet deep inside a question stirred, a question she could not silence. Why had he looked at her differently? Why had his words sounded like more than simple curiosity? And why, for the first time in years, did she feel that maybe her story was not finished yet? The next day, the human's presence became the talk of the settlement. He moved through the narrow streets with calm steps, buying food, asking about directions, repairing a strap on his pack. Wherever he went, eyes followed him. Some admired his strength, some feared his silence, and some whispered warnings. And always, the whispers circled back to her. The alien woman felt the stares more than usual. Each glance from her people carried weight, as if they expected her to fail once. Or, she sat in her stall at the edge of the market, arranging herbs in neat rows, but her hands shook slightly. She knew what they were waiting for. They wanted the human to see her flaw. They wanted to watch the moment he would turn away in disgust. By noon, 2 traders stood nearby, speaking loudly enough for him to hear. "He does not know," one said with a smirk. "Someone should tell him before he wastes his time." The other chuckled. "Let him find out himself. He will walk away soon enough." The words pierced her heart. She lowered her head, praying the human had not heard. Yet she saw him glance in their direction, his jaw tightening. He said nothing, but his silence carried a weight sharper than their laughter. Later that day, when the sun hung high and the heat pressed down on the market, she walked toward the well to draw water. A group of young women stood nearby, their voices filled with cruel amusement. "Why does he speak to her?" one sneered. "Does he not know she is cursed?" Another replied, "He will know soon. Humans want children more than anyone. Once he learns the truth, he will not even look at her again." The woman froze, her bucket slipping slightly in her hands. Shame washed over her like cold water. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the ground so no one could see her. Yet before she could turn away, the human stepped forward. He had been filling his canteen at the well, and he had heard every word. His voice was steady, not loud but firm enough for all to hear. "What curse?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the women. They faltered under his stare, their smirks fading. One of them muttered, "She cannot bear children, everyone knows it." The human's eyes did not shift. "And for that, you mock her." His tone carried no anger, only a quiet strength that made the air grow still. The women exchanged uneasy glances. None dared answer. At last they muttered excuses and left, their laughter gone. The marketplace grew hushed, as if waiting for what he would do next. The alien woman's chest tightened. She expected him to turn toward her, to look at her with the same pity or disappointment she had seen 100 times before. But he did not. He only filled his canteen, capped it, and gave her a nod before walking away. Her heart raced. He had not defended her with grand words or dramatic gestures, but his simple refusal to join in their cruelty was enough to shake her world. For the first time in years, someone had stood still beside her rather than walk away. That night, she sat alone outside her small home, staring at the stars. She remembered his eyes, the quiet way he had silenced the whispers. Questions swirled inside her. Why did he not reject her? Why did he not laugh? Why did he treat her as if she were no different from anyone else? The thought unsettled her. It felt like a door she had long ago locked was being pushed open from the other side. But fear did not let her rest. She told herself it was only a matter of time. Once he learned everything, he too would leave. Better to guard her heart now than to let hope grow and then be crushed. She whispered to herself, and do not believe, do not trust, do not hope. Yet even as she spoke the words, a small part of her longed for him to prove her wrong. The next morning the whispers grew sharper. People began to warn him directly. An elder stopped him on the road saying, "Do not waste your kindness on her. She cannot give you what you need." Another man told him, "Find another human, she carries no future." But the human only listened in silence, his face unreadable. He did not argue, he did not explain. He simply moved on, leaving the words behind him like dust on the road. The alien woman watched from a distance, her breath caught in her chest. Every time she expected him to walk away, he did not. Every time she thought he would listen to them, he chose not to. His actions spoke louder than their cruelty, and slowly she began to wonder if perhaps his silence was not indifference but strength. Still, shadows of judgment followed her everywhere. The people did not stop whispering. The stares did not fade. She remained the outcast. Yet now, for the first time, she was not alone in the storm. A figure walked beside her path. Not close enough to claim her, not yet, but close enough to remind her that perhaps her worth was not defined by what she lacked, and though she feared the whispers would one day reach his heart, she could not stop the fragile spark of hope that had begun to glow inside her. The days passed slowly, and the human did not leave. He repaired broken straps for travelers, helped merchants carry heavy loads, and traded fairly for food. Wherever he walked, people whispered, warning him again and again about the alien woman. Yet, his steps never avoided her path. He greeted her each morning with a small nod, and though the gesture was simple, it stirred something inside her chest that she could not quiet. One evening, the market grew quiet earlier than usual. Clouds covered the sky, and the air smelled of rain. The woman packed away her herbs, her fingers tired from the day. When she looked up, she saw the human standing a short distance away. He was watching the dark sky as though searching for something beyond the clouds. She hesitated, then gathered her courage. For the first time, she stepped closer to him. Her heart pounded as she asked softly, "You do not fear the whispers?" He turned, his eyes steady, his expression unreadable. "Why should I fear words?" he replied. She lowered her gaze. "Because they speak of me. They tell you the truth. I cannot give children. I cannot give a family. That is why no one stays near me." Her voice trembled, each word pulled from a wound she had kept hidden for years. The human listened in silence. He did not look away. He did not interrupt. The weight of her confession hung between them, heavy as stone. She braced herself for the familiar reaction, pity, disgust, or quiet retreat. But when he finally spoke, his words carried no judgment. "You told me what you cannot give, you did not tell me what you can." Her breath caught. She looked at him confused. No one had ever answered her pain with such a question. "What I can give," she repeated in a whisper, as though the thought had never existed in her mind. "Yes," he said. "Your people speak only of children, of bloodlines, of what continues a name. But family is more than that. What else do you carry inside you? What else can you offer the world?" She stared at him, her lips parted but no words came. All her life she had been measured by one thing, and in that measure she had always failed. To think she might hold something else of value felt unreal. Silence stretched between them, but it was not the heavy silence of shame. It was softer, like the quiet after rain, like the pause before dawn. She felt her chest ache with emotions she could not name: fear, hope, disbelief, and a fragile warmth she had long forgotten. The rain began to fall in light drops. The market stalls closed, and the voices faded until only the two of them remained. Beneath the darkening sky, she pulled her shawl tighter, unsure if she should leave. Yet her feet did not move. Something in his steady presence held her there. At last she whispered, "You will not leave when you know all of me." His eyes met hers. "I have already heard their whispers. Still, I am here." Her throat tightened, and tears blurred her vision. She had promised herself never to cry before another, never to show weakness. But his words broke through her defenses. A tear slipped down her cheek, carried by the rain, and she let it fall without shame. For the first time she felt as if someone saw her not as a failure but as a person. The silence between them no longer hurt. It healed. In that shared quiet, she felt less alone than she had in her entire life. The human did not try to comfort her with false promises. He did not speak of a future, nor did he claim to understand her pain fully. He simply stood beside her, letting the rain fall on them both, as if to say her burden was no longer hers alone to carry. When the storm passed, the sky opened with silver stars. The woman lifted her face to them, breathing deeply. Something inside her shifted, something small but powerful. For the first time, she dared to imagine that her life was not finished. As they walked back toward the settlement, their steps fell into rhythm side by side. No words were spoken, yet the silence told her everything she needed to know. She was not invisible. She was not forgotten. She was not unwanted. And though fear still lingered in her heart, hope had taken root. The human stayed longer than anyone expected. Days turned into weeks, and his presence became part of the settlement's rhythm. He helped mend broken carts, lifted heavy crates for the elders, and traded fairly without cheating. People still whispered, but their voices grew softer, unsure of why he had not left like other travelers. The alien woman kept her distance at first, still afraid to believe. Yet the human often sought her stall in the market. He bought herbs even when he had no need for them. Sometimes he asked her about the plants, sometimes he said nothing at all, just stood quietly as though her presence was enough. One evening he approached her with a different request. "I will travel to the next village tomorrow," he said. "The path is dangerous at night. Come with me. You know these lands better than I do." Her breath caught. No one had ever asked her to walk beside them. She hesitated, fear and longing warring inside her. At last she nodded. "I will go." The next morning they set out together. The road wound through rocky hills and silent forests. For long stretches neither spoke, yet the silence was not heavy. She found herself listening to the sound of his boots, steady and sure, and for once she did not feel alone on the path. At midday they rested beneath a tall tree. She offered him dried fruit, and he accepted it with a quiet smile. "You live here without family," he said after a while. "It is not easy," her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him again of her emptiness, to remind him that she could not give the life others expected. But before she could speak, he continued, "I have no family either. War took them. Since then I have wandered, searching for a place to belong. Sometimes I think I will never find it." She stared at him, stunned. She had always believed humans had strong families bound by loyalty. To hear that he carried the same emptiness as hers made her heart ache. "You are alone," she whispered. "Yes," he said simply, "but being alone does not mean being worthless." His words struck her like a spark in the dark. She realized then that perhaps the bond between them was not pity or curiosity. It was recognition. He saw his reflection in her loneliness and she in his. As they continued the journey, they came upon a group of lost children. Their clothes were torn, their eyes wide with hunger. The woman's heart clenched at the sight. She knelt beside them, offering food from her pouch. The children clung to her, their small hands trembling. The human watched silently, then helped lift the weakest child into his arms. Together they guided the children back to the village, protecting them from the dangers of the road. By the time they reached safety, the children would not let go of her dress. They called her their protector, their mother. The word stunned her. For years she had been branded as the woman who could never be a mother. Yet here were children who looked at her with eyes full of trust, who saw not what she lacked, but what she gave. That night, as they rested by a fire outside the village, she turned to the human. "Why did you help me with them?" she asked softly. He looked into the flames. "Because family is not always blood. Sometimes it is who you choose to protect, who you choose to stand beside." Her throat tightened, and tears threatened again. She looked at the children sleeping near the fire, safe and warm. For the first time, she felt that maybe her curse was not the end of her story. Maybe it was the beginning of something different, something no one had imagined for her. The human met her gaze then, his expression calm but steady. "You are more than what they say," he told her. "You carry strength they cannot see." The words burned into her heart, pushing back years of shame. She realized then that family was not only about bearing children. Family was about giving love, about protecting, about choosing to stay. And in that moment, she understood. She and the human were already building something together, something no whisper could destroy. As the night deepened, the stars shimmered above them. The children slept in peace and the fire crackled gently. The woman leaned back, letting herself breathe for the first time in years. She was not alone. She was not unwanted. She was part of something new. And though the road ahead was uncertain, for the first time she felt ready to walk it, not as a broken woman, but as someone who could create a different kind of family. The days after the journey changed everything. The woman no longer walked with her head bowed. She still felt the whispers, still saw the sharp eyes of those who judged, but she no longer carried the same weight. The human's words echoed in her mind. Family is not only blood, family is who you choose to protect. She began to believe, it little by little, but fate was not ready to leave her in peace. One evening, as the settlement prepared for night, a distant alarm echoed from the watchtower. Shadows moved across the hills, raiders. They came fast, armed with blades and fire, hungry for goods and lives. Fear swept through the streets as people rushed to hide their families. The woman stood frozen for a moment, her heart racing. Memories of shame returned. She had always been seen as useless, unworthy, a woman without children to defend. But beside her, the human tightened his pack straps and readied the old weapon he carried. His eyes met hers, calm but fierce. "Stay behind if you must," he told her. "But I will not let them take the children." Something inside her stirred, stronger than fear. She shook her head. "I will not stay behind." Together they moved through the chaos. The raiders stormed into the settlement, breaking stalls, shouting threats. Families clutched their children and ran, but some little ones were left behind, crying in confusion. The woman's heart burned as she saw two small alien children trapped near a burning cart. Without thinking, she rushed forward. The human fought to clear a path, striking down one raider who tried to block her. She slid to the ground, lifting the terrified children into her arms. The fire roared around them, smoke choking the air. The children clung to her, their small fingers digging into her clothes. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of motherhood, not in blood, but in the desperate need to protect. The raiders pressed closer and the human shouted for her to run. She held the children tight and pushed through the smoke, her legs trembling but unyielding. Every step felt like defiance against the voices that had called her worthless. Every breath was a promise to the little ones in her arms. She would not let them be taken. At the edge of the square, more raiders appeared. Her chest filled with terror, but before they reached her, the human stood in their path. His weapon flashed, his strength unbroken. He fought not for glory but for them, for her and for the children she carried. When the raiders realized they could not win, They fled into the night, leaving only smoke and broken stalls behind. The settlement slowly emerged from hiding, voices rising in disbelief. The woman fell to her knees, holding the children as they sobbed into her arms. Their small voices whispered words that pierced her heart. "Do not leave us, Mother." Her tears flowed freely. She looked at the human, who stood bleeding from a cut across his arm, his eyes fixed on her. In that moment, no words were needed. He saw her for what she truly was, not broken, not cursed, but a protector, a mother in spirit. The people of the settlement gathered around, watching in silence. For years they had mocked her, judged her, cast her aside. Now they saw her kneeling. In the smoke, children clinging to her as though she was their only shield. They saw the human standing beside her unshaken, refusing to leave her side. Something shifted in the eyes of the crowd. For the first time, their whispers did not carry cruelty. They carried wonder. The human stepped closer, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You saved them," he said quietly. She shook her head, her voice breaking. "No, we saved them." The children would not release her, their small arms tight around her neck. She held them close, rocking them gently, whispering comfort. And in that moment she realized the truth. She had always believed she could never be a mother, yet here she was, carrying the role with every heartbeat. The ultimate test had come, and she had not failed. That night, as the settlement rebuilt, she sat by the fire with the human beside her. The children refused to leave her side, their trust shining in their eyes. She no longer felt the emptiness that had haunted her. She felt whole, and though she knew challenges would return, she also knew something unshakable. Her life had meaning, her love had worth, and together with the human she had found the family she thought she could never have. The night after the raid was quiet. The fires had been put out, the wounded were treated, and the settlement returned slowly to its breath. Yet the alien woman could not sleep. She sat by the dying embers of the fire, the children curled against her side, their soft breathing steady as they slept. For years she had imagined nights filled with silence and loneliness, but this night was different. Warmth pressed against her, tiny hands holding her clothes as if refusing to let her go. The human sat across from her, his arm bandaged from the fight. He did not speak, only watched the flames fade to ash. She looked at him, her heart heavy with gratitude and confusion. At last she whispered, "Why do you stay? You could walk away as all the others did. You know my truth." He lifted his eyes to hers, steady and unshaken. "Because truth does not make you less. I see who you are. You think you cannot give life, yet you give something greater. You give hope. You give safety. You give love. That is family." Her throat tightened, her eyes filling with tears. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen past her weakness. "But I am not a mother," she said, her voice trembling. He shook his head gently. "Look beside you." She turned to the children. Even in sleep, their small fingers clutched at her, their faces pressed close as though she was their shelter. Her heart broke open in that moment, not with pain, but with something fierce and unshakable. She realized she was already what she thought she could never be. A mother, not by birth, but by choice, by action, by love. The dawn came with a soft, golden light. The settlement woke slowly, families stepping out to rebuild what the raiders had broken. The woman rose from her seat, the children still clinging to her. People turned their heads, watching her walk through the square. For once, their whispers did not sting. There was no laughter, no pity. Instead, there was quiet respect. An elder stepped forward, his voice careful. "You protected what we could not. You saved the children. You have given this place more than we ever believed you could." She lowered her head, unsure how to respond. For years she had been cast out, made smaller by their judgment. Now the same voices carried recognition. Yet she did not stand taller because of their approval. She stood taller because she had discovered her own worth. The human remained beside her, silent but firm. When the children were finally reunited with their families, they clung to her one last time, calling her their mother again. Their words stayed in her chest long after they left, like a fire that would never die. That evening, she and the human sat at the edge of the settlement, watching the horizon. She turned to him, her voice soft but certain. "You gave me something no one else did. You gave me the chance to see myself as more than a failure. For that I will never forget you." He looked at her, his expression calm, but carrying something deep. "And you gave me something too. You showed me that family can be found even when it is lost. I thought I would wander forever, but now I know where I belong." Her breath caught. "Where?" she asked. His answer was simple. "Here, with you." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, rich with the weight of promises unspoken. For the first time in her life, she did not fear what tomorrow might bring. As the stars lit the sky, the woman felt peace settle inside her. She no longer carried the burden of shame. She no longer believed she was unwanted. She had found someone who chose her, not in spite of her pain, but because of her strength. She had found children who had shown her that motherhood was not only about birth, it was about love. She had found a family. The path ahead would not be easy. The galaxy was wide, filled with dangers and struggles. But as she looked at the human beside her, she knew they would face it together. She no longer walked alone. The woman who once whispered her confession to the stars, "I cannot have children, no one will ever want me," now whispered something different. "I was wrong. I am not empty. I am not cursed. I am loved." And, in the quiet of that night under the endless sky, she stepped into the life she had once believed impossible, the life of the family she never expected.